All right, and we're back. Welcome, everyone. So today, I'd like to talk about...
Hey there. Sorry I'm late. My, store was super busy.
Barry? One of the characters from my upcoming animated series, The Chronicles of Clenchport? What are you doing here?
Isn't this the, Doomsday Prepper podcast?
No, but since you're here, do you want to go ahead and tell everybody a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm, Barry Ashland, and I'm a Doomsday Prepper. I even run a shop outside the Smart Shopper in Clenchport. It's, super successful.
Uh-huh. Well, what made you want to become a Doomsday Prepper?
Oh, that's a long story. You got, 6 hours to spare?
No. Actually, I'm trying to record my
Yeah, great. Thanks, Bailey.
It's Bradley.
Yeah, sure thing, Brandon. Okay, so it all started when I was watching a late-night episode of Unsolved Mysteries.
6 hours later.
And once I discovered that horrible truth about the universe, I decided to become a prepper.
Wow, that's quite the story.
Yeah. Anyway, ready to start this Doomsday Prepper podcast?
No, Barry, this isn't the Doomsday Prepper podcast.
Then what the heck is it?
Well, welcome everyone, including Barry, to the Saved as Draft podcast. Welcome, all you beautiful people, to episode 20 of the Saved as Draft podcast. I cannot believe, I never would have believed in a million years that I would actually be able to start a podcast, let alone make it to 20 episodes. We're also fast approaching 8,000 downloads of the show, which is incredibly insane to me. So thank you to everyone who's been here from the beginning and everyone who's joined along the way. Your support means the world to me. This week's episode is another epic feast for your ears. We'll start off with a weekly shoutouts that we always do, and then we'll get into the discussion on the lessons I've learned after 20 episodes of running the Saved as Draft podcast, including some tips on how to start your own and why I think you should. After that, we'll switch over to this week's featured author interview. I'm insanely excited to welcome another horror author to the show who has written some of the most vivid and visceral stories that I've ever read. He used to go by just EMR, but has since revealed his true name to the world. You'll have to wait to the interview to find out what those initials stand for. Or, you could look him up on Substack, because he put his name in his profile, but come on, preserve the intrigue. Besides, you're already here, so you don't have to wait much longer. I also want to shout out M. Ann Avera this week, who wrote a new poetry and prose piece called Some Questions that I commissioned by donating to her Ko-Fi. It's a short piece, and it's insanely beautiful as a work of art that merges poetry and prose by asking meaningful questions about our place in the universe. It also zooms in to show some incredibly beautiful details, and the way it flows from one line to the next is stunning. It's an amazing piece, and I couldn't be happier with how it turned out. I'll leave a link to the piece in the show notes. Okay, and the last item for the introduction this week is another huge thank you to everyone doing the Madness and Mayhem Challenge. We're coming up to the end of the month, but I promise I still have a couple surprises up my sleeve. Check my subscriber chat every day for a new prompt, and shout out to everybody who helped me make sure it was actually working earlier today. I was freaked out when I got some reports that people couldn't see it, but we should be good now. Alright, let's move on to this week's shoutouts. Every week on Tuesdays, I open up a thread in my subscriber chat for podcast shoutouts. I collect the links every week and add them to a doc where I choose 5 at random using a random number generator. So it's always worth dropping a link to your latest story, poem, or article when you have a chance. Keep in mind that I've also recently partnered with Mina Howell, who hosts the Penny Dreadfuls podcast. She's also selecting several stories from that same thread and a thread in her subscriber chat, so if you share your link, you have double the chances to get featured on one of our shows. This week, I only had a few people share links in the thread, but luckily, Mina and I's document has plenty of links from prior weeks that weren't featured on the show before. So I went back and I grabbed a few of those to fill out our 5 stories for this week. If you submitted a link a while back and you're on this week's episode out of nowhere, that's why. And here are this week's shoutouts. First up this week is Grammy's Meatloaf by The Graveyard Kitchen. This story was submitted for day 1 of the Madness and Mayhem Challenge, and it so happens to be the first story that I read from Graveyard Kitchen. The publication's concept is fascinating. Each story centers around a recipe, which in this case is the aforementioned meatloaf. This story begins with some wonderfully atmospheric prose in the beginning before it transitions to a full recipe complete with ingredients and cooking instructions. Now here's where it gets really cool. Within the instructions of the meatloaf recipe, the author continues to pepper in, pun intended, small bits of storytelling. So you're not only reading a recipe that feels like it would probably work, but full disclosure, I haven't tried to make Grammy's meatloaf, so I don't know for sure, but it also serves as a way to further immerse you in the story. I have some more stories from this author to read, and I've only read this one so far, but I'm completely sold on the concept here and this really unique structure. It's not often that I see something and say, yeah, I've never seen this before, and that was the case here, so it absolutely works. Here's an excerpt from the story that I really enjoyed. Last night, it called me. I didn't plan to make it, it just started. A cool kitchen, a warm flicker behind the eyes, a kind of quiet that makes a person reach for what they shouldn't. I took out the ground beef, the turkey, the onion. I didn't have a reason, but something did. I shaped the loaf with my bare hands, dragged a fork across the top, and slid it into the oven. And then came the knock. Amazing. I love the sharp pacing and the chilling word choice that slowly builds a sense of dread leading up to that knock at the end of the excerpt. Check this author out. You'll find a link to the story in the show notes. Next up this week is Night Watch by J.R. Phillips. This is another debut author here on the show, and my first time reading their work. And once again, I am blown away and humbled by the sheer talent that surrounds me in this community. It's amazing. Right off the bat, the story features some really stunning original art that I would absolutely frame and hang on my wall if I could. It sets the stage for a story that starts out light, but quickly descends into some darker territory. We join our protagonist while they're walking their dog at night, and they do this because it's actually quiet at night in their neighborhood. A body, you see, was discovered recently at their local lake, so people are spooked, and our protagonist isn't really worried about it because they enjoy the peace and quiet. I love how we get a healthy amount of backstory and world building while we're seeing some of the personality quirks of the protagonist and the dog here in the story. For example, the beginning of the story makes multiple jokes about using the poop bag as a weapon, and it's hilarious. Things get suspicious, though, towards the end, and I won't say anything else to avoid spoilers, but suffice to say, the writing is very captivating, it's well-paced, and there's a great dose of unique style, and like I said, a lot of personality to really immerse you into the world and the characters. I'm dying to read part 2, and apparently it's already out, so as soon as I'm done recording this, I know what I'm reading. Here's an excerpt that I really enjoyed from this one. My dog was the master out here, and she knew it, guiding me towards whichever smell she deemed worthy of her inspection. I didn't mind, though. Unlike her, I got to go outside whenever I wanted. We scraped our way back up the main road of the community, past the pool. Just an hour ago, the sounds of summer vacation were seemingly endless. Now the air was thick with quiet. We were almost home. Another walk through darkness survived. Flashlights appeared down the road. Shit. Spoke too soon. See how that excerpt gives us insight into the characters before subverting our expectations with that unexpected sighting at the end? A wonderful example of how it builds atmosphere while keeping the pacing intact. I really love the story, and I'm very excited for part 2. Third this week is Death Wears a Wu-Tang Hoodie by Pepe Writes. This is my first time reading this author's work as well, and you guessed it, I was blown away. But in all seriousness, it's amazing to continuously find such unique and captivating writing styles and voices. I mean, in this case, the title alone should tell you that this story is going to be a wild ride, and it is, but not in the way you'd expect. In fact, the vast majority of the story is set during a typical day. Nothing crazy happens, but the narrator's inner thoughts dance between the mundane and the profound in ways that I found extremely intriguing. For example, the story opens with the protagonist musing about what life would be like if they were a salmon, before jumping back to reality, or in this case, snapping back to reality Eminem style, as the story says, and I do love that reference. Before the story's end, though, we do meet Death, and he is indeed wearing a Wu-Tang hoodie. But it's the dialogue here that feels equal parts genuine, completely normal, and yet somehow insanely profound. It's conversational, but it says so much with every line. Honestly, it's kind of hard to describe, but that's what makes it so special. Check out this excerpt that I grabbed from the story. Habits outlive the soul's will. Mine was barely flickering, but I kept swimming upstream. No goal, just momentum. Downstream, upstream. What's the difference with this many rocks? Maybe I'd been still for years. If you don't know where you're heading, every path feels like a treadmill. And life's not measured in kilometers anyway. I swear, there's a bunch of lines like that last one that I just went printed out and framed. There's just so much wisdom in this story. So check the show notes for a link because you really gotta check this one out. It's very cool. Fourth this week is Darkness No Longer Lives Here by Tara Deacon. Now, before I get into this story, I have to clarify two things. Number one, this is in fact a true story. And number two, this story discusses topics like sex trafficking from the perspective of a victim. For the sake of those who can't read topics like that, I won't be going into a lot of detail about this story, but if you are able to read it, I highly recommend you check out the link in the show notes. Instead of talking about the story itself here, I'd like to instead talk about what stories like this mean in the broader spectrum of the writing community and for humanity at large. The simple fact of the matter is that stories like this are often left untold because the victim is scared, traumatized, or otherwise unable to talk about what happened. Sharing trauma like this requires a level of courage that I can't even fathom, but Tara did it anyway. She tells her story here in full detail, and she talks about how it affected her. Not only that, but she talks about how she's grown past it and taken her power back as time has gone on. It's incredibly inspiring to see someone like Tara share a story like this. Stories like these are hard to read because you have to reconcile with the fact that this actually happened. You have to acknowledge that human beings are capable of horrors more terrifying than anything you and I could write about. And that's not easy to do, but it is important. See, others who have suffered similar trauma will see this, and it will change them. Maybe they'll feel less alone. Maybe they'll be inspired to tell their story. Or maybe they'll see a way for themselves to heal as well. So I just want to thank Tara for sharing this with the world, and for allowing me the opportunity to talk about it on the podcast here. Saved as Draft is a show about writing, but more than that, it's about the writers who exercise their creativity in countless different ways. Stories like this one are why I do this podcast, and why I dedicate so much time every week to talking about members of the community and interviewing them as well. The people behind the stories are just as important as the stories themselves. Our lives are all drafts in progress. We are all, each and every one of us, full of stories yet untold. And I'm just so grateful to be here to read and talk about your incredible work. I've chosen an excerpt from Tara's story here that's right at the end, but I think it perfectly describes my sentiment about why this story is so important. It goes like this. I finally found my voice to tell my story, and to help others who have gone through the same situation, or to inspire those who are still healing. Whatever has happened, we still get to choose how we live. Life is short, and I refuse to remain a victim. A huge thank you to Tara again for sharing this story with us. I think I speak for all of us when I say that we are also very glad that you're here, Tara, and a part of this community. Okay, and for our last shout out this week, we're looking at Endless Histories by 2D. This is one writer that I started reading recently, and every time I read some of their work, it feels like the first time all over again. The way this writer can go from poetry to short stories and then back to poems again, all while offering a unique and captivating style, is just amazing. This particular piece is one of those poems that has a monumental scope. It covers so much ground and so much time that it's hard to describe it in mere words. It's honestly greater than the sum of its parts, but each of those parts are beautiful, elegant, and handcrafted masterpieces. It's times like these, when I'm reading poems like this one, that I see human creativity in its purest form. But I have to say, there's a richness to this poem that could never be replicated. It's so masterful, vivid, and breathtaking that my first thought was just that it feels human, despite the fact that it takes place over the course of eons, far longer than any one person could ever hope to live. But I love that about it. Check it out. Here's an excerpt that really blew me away. And still he lives. When the oceans rise to swallow the land, he swims with the memories of faceless souls, lost to the flood, who pull at his ankles. When the skies burn and the ground cracks, he walks through fire unscathed, though he prays, oh, how he prays, for the flames to swallow him whole. Even just reading that one stanza makes me tear up from how rich and profound that each line feels. And that's just one stanza. Do yourself a favor. Check out 2D's work. Every piece they publish has this incredible effort behind it, and of course, you'll find a link to this one in the show notes. And hey, that's it for our shoutouts this week. But again, I just want to say that I'm so incredibly impressed by all of your work. Every week, it feels like the shoutouts on the show here get better and better. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to read and discuss your stories like this, because it makes my week every single week. And remember, check my subscriber chat every Tuesday for a thread where you can share your own links, because I never want to stop talking about your work. So stop on by and drop your latest. It really means the world to me. All right, and this week's writing discussion is all about the lessons I've learned since starting the Saved as Draft podcast 20 weeks ago. Since then, we've had a new episode every week, and I've learned a lot about podcasting, interviewing people, and how to work with audio. So here are 5 lessons I've learned, and expect a topic on this in a future article where I'll expand upon some of these a bit more. Lesson number 1 is to write a script, or at the very least have an outline. If you go back to the first couple episodes of the show here, you'll notice that I tend to ramble a lot, and there were a lot of ums and ahs because all I had were some bullet points and a doc to guide me. I think that kind of format works if you have multiple hosts, and you can kind of keep the conversation moving, but if you're running solo like me, barring my author interviews, you'll find yourself stumbling more often than not. These days, I write up the entire script and read from it as I'm recording, but you can find a middle ground if that's better for you and your schedule. My interviews, of course, are not scripted, but I do write the questions beforehand so the authors can check them out. Lesson number 2 is to decide on a show structure to begin with, but allow the show to evolve as it goes on. When I first started the Saved as Draft podcast, I talked about my work a lot, and I even had a gaming segment if you can believe it. And those things are cool, but ultimately I decided I wanted to focus on writing in the community more, so that led me to shift towards the shoutouts and the weekly interviews that we've been doing. When you first set out to do your podcast, think about what you want the theme to be. Is it about writing? Is it about a specific topic? Or maybe it's a place for you to narrate your stories or other people's stories. You can do a podcast about anything, really, and the only requirement is that you have something that you can do for a while, or at least for a good number of episodes to build your audience. Some podcasts are even narrative stories of their own, where each episode is a new chapter. Fun fact, I'm actually working on a separate podcast that's set in the fictional town of Clenchport, Virginia. This podcast will tell stories from the town's history, and it's called The Many Worlds of Clenchport, and I'm hoping it'll be out soon. But, as you can tell, that's going to be a different beast than the show you're listening to right now, which is more informative and focused on new stories and writing topics each week. Adding in the interviews is also something I've done recently, but I'm really happy with how those are going. Lesson number 3 is to make sure you have the right tools. Podcasting requires a good microphone and some software to edit your audio, and allow you to add music or sound effects as needed. These things can really bring your show to life. I myself get royalty-free music and sound effects from Pixabay, for example, but there are options. In terms of software, I use Audacity. It's a free download, and you can record raw audio, cut out dead air, excess breathing, and do all kinds of other good stuff with the editing. And you can even go even deeper with all kinds of tools to fine-tune the audio, to ensure it sounds consistent and high quality. And the best guide that I've ever seen for Audacity was actually written by a Substack author by the name of Aurelian Ashmore. And I'll put a link to his guide in the show notes, but he does some incredible stuff, and I hope to one day do stuff that's up to that level of quality. So check that out in the show notes to learn how you can polish up your own audio in Audacity and other software. Lesson number 4 is to promote your show. I know it's a small thing and it's pretty obvious, but there's a lot of people out there who launch podcasts and then sit back and wait for people to show up. And then when nothing happens, they're like that shocked Pikachu meme. My podcast's first episode has 40 downloads as of this recording, which may sound pretty good, but after a few episodes, that number jumps to 400, 500, and in one case, a prior episode has almost 800 downloads. And I'm pretty confident that that happened because I spend time promoting it. And of course, I was consistent with my schedule, which is also important. Whenever a new episode goes live, I always tag the featured authors and all the shout-out authors as well. But I also promote the episode on Blue Sky, Threads, and Facebook to get the word out. And sometimes if I'm feeling brave, I might even film myself a TikTok, but that's somewhat rare. Lesson number 5 is to be yourself. Since the beginning of this show, I've made it a point to be unapologetically me. That means wild and wacky comedy skits and weird voices that may not be funny to everyone. But it also means genuine reviews for every shoutout each week where I share what I loved about each story. It also means not listening to imposter syndrome telling me that no one cares about anything I have to say. Because if that was true, I wouldn't have so many amazing listeners like you listen to this right now. I know starting a podcast sounds scary, and let me tell you, it is a lot of work. But we all have a unique voice and a unique perspective that we can offer the world. Whether that's talking about writing, gaming, marine biology, baking, or something else entirely, trust me, there are people who will want to hear what you have to say. You just have to find your audience and adapt your show as time goes on. Listen to feedback, incorporate the community, and promote the heck out of it. And no matter what, you'll have me listening every week. So if you start your own podcast, do me a favor and tag me. I'll share it and listen to it myself, because I love listening to podcasts. Okay, and next up is this week's author interview. This week, I'm excited to welcome to the show a horror author that I met very shortly after joining Substack. From the moment I read his work, I knew that I was going to be a fan. His type of horror is visceral, his stories are really unique, and his word choice and imagery are insanely vivid. Above all, he's an amazing human being and a genuine positive force in this writing community. So let's jump into this week's interview with EMR, aka Edward Marlo Ruiz. All right, everybody, I'm really excited to welcome to the Saved as Draft podcast one of the first writers that I met when I joined Substack and one of the finest horror authors I've ever read. Please welcome to the show EMR, aka Edward Marlo Ruiz. Thank you for coming on to the show.
Yo, it really is a blessing to be here. Thank you for having me.
Very excited to have you here. So let's go ahead and start off by having you tell us a little bit about yourself and your creative journey thus far.
All right. So, like you said, my full name is Edward Marlo Ruiz. I'm 22 years old currently. I just turned 22 in November. I'm based out in Southern California, and I'm going to school there for English literature in hopes to become a teacher. I've always been creative, like my whole life. So, I've always had stories on my mind, I would say, and I never really took it seriously though. So I always would see it as sort of like this dream that would probably just happen one day or something. And so last year, I lost my grandfather, and it sort of twisted my view on a lot of things. So basically, I told myself I was going to take it seriously and start putting in work of September of 2024. And I was doing it so I can get started early and improve my writing throughout my whole life. And what really got me started to do that, was my grandfather, but I was also watching. I'm really into Game of Thrones and George R. R. Martin, and I was watching a lot of his interviews. Just I was like binging them, probably like August of last year. Something that really hit me was his like beginning, how he started to write. He said he mentioned like, yeah, it's a different time for when he started. He didn't start in like a digital kind of age, but the important thing he said that I took from it was that you just need to start, and you just got to start putting yourself out there. And so from that day forward, literally, I started writing again, and I looked up some contests and publication stuff that was out there. I can't remember the name now, but it was like a big literary kind of website, and that brought me to Submittable. And yeah, I started writing, seriously writing, September of last year. So yeah, that's my journey so far.
Very nice, very nice. So, interesting how you said that you're going to school with plans to be a teacher. Do you have an idea of what exactly type of class you would like to teach, or what age group you're looking to teach?
Well, right now, I'm hoping to get into either middle school or high school teaching to help teach English literature, of course.
Mm-hmm.
My plan is to get my master's and hopefully PhD to teach at a college level in the future.
Okay, awesome. That's great. No, that's really cool. So, I love the inspiration. Kind of some of the stuff you were inspired by George R. R. Martin, especially the kind of the advice there to just kind of jump into it and get started. I think that's really good
Yeah.
advice. How long have you been writing stories, and do you recall kind of that moment when you knew you wanted to be a writer? Was it when you were reading George R. R. Martin's work, or was it earlier in your
Uh,
life, or what?
it
Like, what
was
kind of made that spark?
it was definitely earlier in my life. I would say it was like fourth grade. I put it here. I read Rick Riordan books, if you remember the Percy Jackson series
Okay.
and his Heroes of Olympus series, if you read that one. That really inspired me to like think about, I guess, stories differently. And it made me realize like, hey, I can, I can put this down in words. I don't need to be like playing with action figures and like filling in, you know, black plot holes and stuff like that, like big voids of just what would you call it? Plagiarizing movies that I've seen. Yeah, that's what really got me started was reading those books in the fourth grade, really liking them, really enjoying them, and I would say that's what set me down on this path to the Young Authors Award for my elementary school,
Hmm.
and which I actually won in fifth grade. With you probably could have guessed it, but it was a horror story, and I named it The Ghost Soldier, and it was published, and I have it here with me still. But yeah, it was about a story about this dude that owns a farm in America, and he starts getting hunted by this Civil War soldier, but he doesn't, leave. He stays to figure out why he's being haunted and, you know, what this soldier is telling him to do. And the story ends with him giving the soldier a peaceful burial, and he doesn't get haunted anymore.
Wow.
So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool. Yeah, and you wrote that in fifth grade, you said?
Well, I would mostly give the credit to my mom for really ironing out the details.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But I know I came up with like, oh, Ghost Soldier, dude being haunted, farm, stuff like that. But yeah,
Okay.
credit to my mom for sure.
So, yeah, a team effort. Yeah.
Yeah. But I knew that then, like, I want to, I want to do this. I want to write. I want to make stories.
That is really, really cool. That's actually extremely similar to my story too. I was in elementary school when I took home third place at in a creative writing
Oh,
contest, and
awesome.
that was kind of my moment. So it's really cool to hear that you had a similar experience that kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah, pretty much.
turned you
Like,
into a
oh,
writer.
what?
That's really, really cool. Do you
Yeah,
have any plans to publish that story, or maybe like revamp it and re-release it? Because
yeah.
it sounds really good.
Now that I like retell it, I actually really like the idea still, honestly. And I maybe one day, I know that would be really fun to do. Honestly, that'd be super fun to do. So we'll
Okay,
see how.
cool. Yeah, no, I think it would do really well. It sounds like it's very similar to kind of what you've been doing on Substack and stuff. So I
Yeah,
feel like it
like
would,
a heartfelt horror kind of.
yeah, I feel like it would fit nicely into what you're doing. I would love to read it.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. I appreciate that. Yeah, well, I'll think about it for sure.
Cool,
It's the
cool.
spirit.
So, interesting that you kind of started out with a horror story too. I love that, number one. But was horror something that you always knew, like, yeah, I'm going to write horror stories, or were there other genres that you've kind of thought about diving into, or kind of what was the process there towards? Because these days, obviously, I know you for your horror, but I'm just curious if you've ever, dabbled in other genres.
Yeah, that's the funny thing is that I never even really saw myself specializing in like horror and stuff like that. What I actually thought about a lot, like in my early like childhood creative days, and sometimes in high school, especially in high school, actually, I thought about writing. What inspired me was like high fantasy and stuff like that. So what I wanted to write was the same kind of thing, was high fantasy and like general adventure sort of plot lines and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And I always enjoyed horror though. So yeah, but I just never really imagined myself like being really super good at it, I guess. But looking back, I would say the Ghost Soldier was probably a sign that I just never took seriously. So yeah.
Yeah, these days, if I'm not mistaken, almost all of your stories on Substack are horror. Would you agree, or are there other ones that maybe I haven't seen that would fall into other
Um,
genres?
yeah, I actually have dabbled in more fantasy too.
Okay.
In the past 30 days with the whole 30-day thing, I did a few fantasy things, and I actually came up with an idea I want to expand on for my fantasy project. And I guess yeah, you're right though. You everything that I do right has an element of like the dark or horror
For
for sure.
sure,
So
for sure,
like
for
for
sure.
sure, yeah.
Yeah,
It's just something I never thought I would specialize in, and it's kind of wild, I guess. But I'm glad it is because I really do enjoy horror.
yeah, yeah. And I know I'm not the only one that absolutely loves your horror stories. So you're onto something for sure with your
Thank
work
you,
that you're doing.
thank you.
Um,
I've tried sci-fi too. I just don't think I'm very efficient at it. But
sure.
I came up with a recent idea that I really enjoyed. So, and I have a couple back burners that I'm waiting on answers for. So we'll see. What the future holds.
No, no, I love it. That's fantastic. Before I move on to the next question, is there anything you'd like to share about some of these other ideas? For example, the fantasy idea you said you had. Did you want to drop any hints or teasers for our listeners here, or are you still
Um,
kind of bringing it together?
Well, the first part's out there. I'll probably rewrite it, but it's out there called "A Piece of the Sun," titled by Gillian Fletcher,
Hmm.
supporter, and another writer on here. It's just super awesome. It tells of it's like an introduction to one of my countries in my fantasy project, and I have a couple more stories I've been writing for like months that I really want to put out as serial sometime this summer. But yeah, it's
Cool.
all set in like the same world I call Xerxes.
Very cool. Okay, awesome. Yeah, and for the benefit of the listeners as well, I also wanted to mention the 30-day challenge that you did
Oh yeah.
that led to this fantasy idea that you were just talking about. Could you tell us a little bit about how that worked and what you kind of learned from that challenge? Because I thought it was super unique.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome. Yeah, for context, the 30-day challenge was just a challenge I put on myself for the month of April. It was inspired by someone called Jimmy Doom on here. He's pretty big. He writes fiction. Well, he used to write fiction every day. He did it for over 1,000 days.
Wow.
So yeah, I was like, well, damn, if he could do 1,000, I'm gonna try 30, because I'm filled with. I know I'm filled with so many ideas, and I feel like I could have done it. So I did it, and it was pretty rough. I would say it's a pretty rough process. The first week were my longest stories, I noticed. And after that, they shortened down a lot. Here and there, I would write. Mainly, the challenge for me, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. The challenge for me was to write a story every single day for 30 days in April. And
Mhm.
I completed it, thank God. And thank you, everyone, for the support, by the way. It was very, very uplifting in me completing this. And um, I wrote a story every day. I edited it the same night, same day, usually. I realized halfway through the month I would need to sort of slow down, so I wrote the stories the night before
Mm.
instead. And that helped out a lot. And it really helped out in me discovering my habits, my writing habits, my bad writing habits, and my good writing habits.
Mm.
And I learned a lot about what what my voice wants to be, and how I want to experiment with my writing. And I think it really helped me in just focusing on how I sort of uh, bring myself to this space where I create something.
Mm.
And I think it's helpful in just you learning more about yourself and your process to better prepare you for, your creative sessions in the future, I would say. And I learned a lot I learned a lot just improving. So I would say it's a good thing to improve. You don't got to like put it out there, but I think writing every day is important.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And, taking on a challenge like that, it's why I love doing some of the challenges and prompts that I've been
Yeah.
doing since I joined Substack. 'Cause I also completely agree that it's like when you're practicing, when you're kind of stretching those creative muscles, when you're
Mhm.
experimenting, that's where you really find like what you can bring to the table that's unique as a writer. So that's fantastic.
Exactly. Yeah. And you can find some of your flaws too, which I
Right.
think is super helpful.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Yeah.
As part of that challenge, if I'm not mistaken, I'm hoping I'm not getting confused with something else. But as part of that challenge, if correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't all the stories that you published also untitled, and you invited the community to suggest titles for them? Is that right?
Yeah, you're so right. I completely forgot about that. I'm sorry.
You're fine.
Yeah, I what I did was I made my weekday stories untitled with no sign or indication as to what the story held. You would
Hmm.
just have to click on it and read it. And I invited readers that read the story to leave a title that they thought would be fitting for my work, to sort of get them involved and um, get their creative muscles, I guess, flowing and going, to base it down to a few words, what I wrote. And I think it really helped in engaging people. And it was really, really fun. Like a lot of fun. So
Yeah,
thank you, everybody, for participating.
yeah, that was really cool, and I think I mentioned this to you as well. But just for the benefit of the listeners, my series that I've been doing, Echoes from the Abyss, has a reader kind of input aspect to it, where at the end of each chapter, I ask people to vote on where the story goes next, and I was 100% inspired to get that idea by what you did with this Untitled series. Just the idea of like bringing in the reader to like make an impact on the story, whether it's the title or in my case, the events of the story. So just, got to shout that out and say thank you for the inspiration
Yeah,
there.
yeah, no. Thank you, honestly, for I think it also it's like a big loop here where it stemmed from your sort of interaction with everybody, and I wanted to, come up with something that engaged people as well. And if people want to do that too, like, the untitled kind of thing, like go ahead. It's not just my thing. So please like interact, it's an engaging, fun way to just have people read and get together and discuss. It's cool.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And I have to also, tip my hat to everything you've been doing in the community as well. As I've said on my notes and stuff on Substack, I think you're a perfect example of how to bring in the community, highlight the community, and really just be kind of a positive force. So
Yeah,
kudos
thank
to
you.
you for that because, like I said, it's really nice to see.
I really appreciate that. And it stems from you. So honestly, it's just the big loop here. So
It's a good loop.
yeah, yeah. The
It's a good loop.
loop of positivity for sure.
Right, exactly. So, yeah. So my next question here is, and you touched upon this a little bit earlier, but I'm curious where your kind of main sources of inspiration come from. So we talked about George R. R. Martin as an example, which is awesome. But I'm curious because like I've seen, for example, shades of like. For example, gaming in some of your stories, where I remember one of your stories was set on like a mountain during a snowstorm, and I made a comment that it felt like the
Yeah.
opening of Red Dead Redemption 2, and that was a funny moment. Um, so yeah, curious where do you often find yourself getting inspired? Like, what are the different kind of channels that you get inspiration from?
Well, I would begin to say like pretty much I try to gather inspiration from like everything I can consume in a way like all of what I have consumed has been inspiration in one way or the other. I would say the most influential would be movies and video games for sure. I would say I've played more video games than I've actually read books. But the thing is, I haven't played like particularly a whole lot of horror video games. I guess I get my inspirational horror from a lot of movies. I've watched like The Exorcist, Hereditary. Those are like top two for me,
Okay.
honestly. The Exorcist and Hereditary. I think those are awesome. And The Shining, I would say too, that has been very influential. And I don't know, dude, that's just a different kind of horror. I would say that is is very it messes with your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Very
Mm-hmm.
psychological.
Yeah.
Um, I also, so I would say I get inspiration from everything. George R. R. Martin, I think his books, I would say he writes in almost every genre in his Game of Thrones books.
Mm-hmm.
He also does horror very well too. It's really cool what he can do with which you can do with horror fantasy. And I also wanted to shout out the creepy pastas and audio narrated YouTube horror stories that I absolutely consumed when I was in high school and everything too. I think those are underrated as inspirations, but they're definitely inspirational. And I think they drove a lot of my what I like to write. So yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, no, I love the shout out for creepypastas and stuff on YouTube. I absolutely pull inspiration from stuff like that, especially like some of the more recent analog horror type of series that you've seen on there have been super creative and interesting.
That's
Um,
awesome. I actually haven't been too into the recent stuff, but I know I was into like all the audio narration and stuff in like the 2010s and stuff.
right. No, absolutely. That's really cool. So, my next question then kind of dovetails nicely from what we were just talking about here. I'm curious how you would classify your unique style of horror and specifically what kind of themes tend to show up in your horror stories.
Wait, first off, I think this is kind of loaded because I feel like I just started and I feel like I'm still trying to find my voice.
Sure.
But um, I when I think about it, really think about it, I would say I really want like to go for like I put down I like to make the reader feel uncomfortable in their comfortable positions. So I really like to focus on just the grime, gritty kind of stuff, the
Hmm.
rawness of humanity. I like, themes of self, mind, and of course, I gotta say humanity again. And I like to focus on, the monsters that we are, I would say, and what we create. And um, I also like to focus on heartfelt stuff too, that kind of um, bends horror into different kind of themes like romance, or like I just said, I would say drama is very nicely done with like psychological horror.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to focus on a lot of loss and loneliness, I would say too.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, I know it's horror or something, but yeah, I would say I'm still trying to figure it out myself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you answered the question perfectly. And the reason why I asked it is because I I firmly believe that if you were to put like a set of horror stories in front of me and cover up the authors' names, that I could pick out which one is yours because your style is so distinct.
Dude, that's so awesome to hear. Thank you so much. I
Yeah, of
appreciate
course. So I mean that's why I had to ask though because I was just like I was it was
what do I think?
yeah, it's just like I was just blown away. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad to know my voice is distinct out there. Thank
Hmm.
you. I do
No, it
really.
absolutely is in a very, very, very good way.
Thank you.
So, this is a question I ask every writer that comes on the show here because I'm just curious about like all the different ways that people kind of made their way to Substack. So, could you tell me a little bit about like how you first heard about Substack, what drew you to the platform, and then if you'd like to share any plans you have, kind of like into the future here for Substack?
Yeah, that sounds great. Substack, I literally hadn't even heard of Substack until December of 2024.
Mm.
I actually found it through Submittable because I was big on getting contests done every single month. And I was doing that, which netted me a publication, my first publication in the Right Launch with a little short story called, oh my God, I can't remember. Yo, sorry, I'll think of it. But
No, you're good. You're
anyways,
good.
what really brought me to Substack was this weekly contest I saw on there called From the Writers Hour. I think it's based in the UK, and I really liked what they were doing every week and giving people like cool prompts to just sort of put out there and submit by the end of the week. That's it. Like it can't be really too serious or nothing. And so I wanted to be there. Like they mentioned Substack, and I was like, okay, that sounds pretty cool. I'll get Substack. I thought Substack was honestly just a like another platform you just had to sign up for real quick. And I realized like, oh, this is more extensive than just like say Submittable, because Submittable is like, you just looking around, you don't really have your own thing unless you're putting out contests and stuff. But yeah, I found it through that and I joined up real just candidly, and I saw like you could put your own writing out there and stuff like that. And I figured, hey, I'll do that with the stuff that,
That
I'm not really going too crazy on. And I guess here we are now.
cool. No, that's fantastic. Do you have any like kind of long-term
Oh,
plans or goals?
yeah, I do. In terms of outside of Substack, well, let me mention inside Substack first. I have a couple collaborations coming out
Okay.
tomorrow. Actually, I want it to be a surprise, but oh well, this is coming out later, right?
Yeah, yeah. This will be out after tomorrow. It'll be on
Yeah.
the
Huh.
next
Okay.
episode.
Well, shout out Mina Howell. We have a collab coming out tomorrow. Should
Nice.
be tomorrow. And I have a collab in the works with Pablo Baez.
Oh
You've
wow.
highlighted
Okay.
one of his stories before, yeah. And I'm open to any other collaborations too. I'm here. That's what I want to do here. That's what I'm looking into. And in terms of outside of Substack, I've been thinking about seriously putting together a little anthology for my own work on
Yeah.
here. It's super early, but I want to take my favorites from here, some of my best, and rework them probably on top of adding like a couple new stories. So, there's never before seen work in there as well. And it's really just an idea, and I got to compile everything, but I've got a good support system, it seems, and I have someone that is willing to do the cover already. So,
Wow.
yeah, who knows by the end of the year, I'm hoping, but I also want to, I'm also trying to put out either a novel or a novella, depending on how long it goes. But I really, really want to write The Abyss, the medieval zombie horror story I wrote up a little bit
Mm-hmm.
last month.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to finish that because I just did some extra research into the Black Plague and everything,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so interesting. It's so cool. I actually did a paper on it for my semester, and I also have a book I'm trying to read to gain more knowledge. So hopefully, either soon, I can start writing this thing and say I finished a full piece of body of work. So yeah,
That's
that's what I
that's
got going on.
fantastic.
And I'm sorry, I just remembered.
Yeah, yeah.
I also have my fantasy project that I've been working on since God. I swear, it was inspired by Skyrim, and I've probably been thinking about it ever since 2011. But I really got started on it in high school, and I really began my work in college when I joined up with my 4 year. When I transferred to my 4 year, I started writing in journals about it, and it's been I think I really wanted to honestly uh, be my magnum opus, if I'm being honest.
Mm.
And I think it will be when everything pans out. So, yeah, it's going to be a lifelong process, but I think it's something that I'm going to absolutely be working on forever. And
Absolutely. That's
I'm more
fantastic.
than happy to. Sorry for cutting you off, but
No, no,
yeah.
you're fine. You're fine. That's super amazing. I love how you have so many like exciting things going on, especially the collaborations. That's really, really cool to hear.
Thank you.
Are those just like jointly written stories, or what's the nature of the collaborations that you're working on?
I think usually it depends on what we're feeling, I guess, with Pablo. Uh, I think what we're trying to do is a nice little small serial kind of piece. It's
Okay.
gonna be so awesome. It's super fucking dope. It's gonna be dope. It's gonna be sci-fi set in a world I created and thought of like last year.
Okay.
And yeah, it's gonna be super awesome. It's gonna be experimental as well. That's what I'm trying to thinking of is experimental and something different because Pablo really just he does his thing out there. So and with Mina, it's just a little small collaboration, joint writing thing that we wanted to make up from a combined idea of ours.
Okay.
And she has one part, well, I have the second part,
Oh,
and
okay. Okay.
yeah, so we both looked over each other's work, and I would say it came together very well. I think that's what's important is highlighting both voices and sort of blending them together to create something new and unique. Super
Awesome.
fun.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. We'll be sure to include a link to that in the show notes as well, so everybody can check it out. 'Cause
Yo,
that sounds
thanks.
amazing.
Yeah, it's gonna be dope.
Yeah, that's really cool. And if anyone is interested in collaborating with you, is the best way to reach you just
Yeah,
through a DM?
yeah, just DM me honestly, and I'm down. I mean, I'm on summer now, so I have time to really put in work for my writing and put some dope stuff out there. I'm down to do anything.
There we go. Well, that's the invitation then. I know I'll be doing something with you at some point for sure. Now that I know you're
Hell
doing
yeah.
collaborations, I'm not going to miss out on this opportunity.
Hell no.
That's awesome, though. Thank you
Just
for sharing
whenever,
all of that.
just let me know.
Yeah, no, for sure. Thank you for sharing all that. I really appreciate it. You have
Yeah,
some
I appreciate
incredibly
you.
exciting stuff going on, and I'm very excited to see it come to
Thank you.
fruition.
I'm super excited to share it because I guess I've been mulling it over for some time now. So yeah,
Yeah, no, it sounds like you got a really good plan in place, and like I said, a lot of really compelling stuff based on what you described here. So that's awesome.
thank you so much.
Um, so uh, curious. My next question here for you is, do you have a favorite, like an overall, like number one favorite story that you've published on Substack so far? Or if that's too tough, you could maybe give us off the top of your head, maybe two or three that are like your top stories. Like if someone wanted to read your work right now and they only have time for a couple stories, what would you tell them to read?
That is an amazing question. I really, really like that question. So I thought about it, and I really couldn't choose one. So I chose what my favorite were right now because I feel like mm, it'll change. But right off the top of my head, I would say please go read The Abyss. It's a horror story, like I said. I mentioned it earlier about zombies and medieval times. It's more than just zombies, though, so be wary. And I would say for a second one, I really, really liked Raven Feathers and White Hands, which is a romance set in Set during the Aztec era, I would say, of the Americas. It's probably one of my favorite I've written because I never ever really write romance, and I don't really go out of my way to take in romance. And I think I really captured this sort of ethereal feel that romance gives you, and especially with the times. It's sort of timeless, is what I'm thinking. Sorry, I'm going on. I also want to shout out The Ritual of Rot that Aurelian Ashmore did a an amazing reading of that you should go listen to.
Yes, I will second. I will second that last one, and I've obviously read The Abyss. I don't know if I feel like I've read the Raven Feathers and White Hands one, but regardless, these will also all be in the show notes for anybody listening to this when the
Yeah,
show
thank
comes
you.
out. So that way you can go check out the author's top picks here. But I have to give a secondary shout out to Ritual of Rot, not only for being a phenomenally written story, but the audio that Aurelian did for that was
Yeah,
spot on. It was incredible.
yeah, it was pretty insane when he first showed me. It was wild.
Yeah, yeah. I've actually been using some of his audio tips for Audacity, and they've been,
Oh, nice.
yeah, it's been super helpful. Like he did a
That's
piece
good.
on like basic settings for compression using the compressor tool in Audacity to kind of make sure the audio is balanced on both the low and high end, and it's been a game changer. So
So
yeah,
he uses Audacity
yeah, that's what I use is
for
Audacity. Yep,
sure, for sure.
yep,
Because
yep.
I'm looking into expanding my audio too. I would like to start reading my own work so more people can access it.
Yeah, no, accessibility is huge when it comes to narration and having audio versions of stories. A lot of people have told me that it's extremely beneficial for them. So
Yeah, I've seen like yeah, firsthand what you guys are doing out there. And it's amazing work what you do, by the way. You're not doing like runovers real quick. Like you're really going crazy and that's inspirational. So,
yeah, it's also I'm entirely self-taught. I
damn.
barely know how to use Audacity when I first started, and I've learned a bit.
Wow.
So
That's awesome, bro.
yeah, if I can do it, then absolutely you can, and anybody else who sets their
Thank you.
mind
I
to it.
appreciate the encouragement. Yeah,
Yeah.
I still yeah, I'm trying to get out there more so.
That's great. No, that's fantastic. And for all the listeners, as well as your benefit, Audacity is a free software, so it doesn't cost a thing
Awesome.
to download, which is why I've been using it because it's really accessible. So,
Instant download.
yep, 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 yep. So yeah, that's fantastic. All right, so we're coming up on the end of my questions here. My last question for you before we wrap things up is now that you've been kind of, putting yourself out there, publishing your stuff, it sounds like you've been having some awesome success, connecting with the community. What advice, or would you say lessons that you've learned so far? It can be just about Substack or just writing in general, but what are some of the lessons that you've learned that you think would be beneficial to kind of share with other writers who are just getting to that first stage?
I want to share the sentiment that George R. R. shared with me. So I would say just start. You know, you just got to start. Start writing, putting pen to paper. Like if you don't like using the computer, you know, there's other methods too. And if you don't have access to a computer, just start writing things down on scratches of napkins. Like who cares? Writing is writing, I would say. And I think the best thing to do for your writing is to just start instead of imagining. In terms of Substack, I would say it's very important to stick your neck out there appropriately. You know, appropriately, emphasis on appropriately. Um, you know, I would say it is a void out there, but if you're just floating along, you know, sometimes the void doesn't answer back. So I would say just keep putting yourself out there appropriately. People will find your links, and you know, blessings to the people that find your words that are important to them. And I wouldn't worry too much about, you know, hitting it big or anything, honestly. I would say this is more of a spot to hone your craft and make connections. And I don't really think it guarantees a lottery payout, but maybe you'll make some friends along the way. And I think that's important in this sort of business and how you improve yourself in your writing. And one important thing also is to simply, you know, try and be yourself. Goes without saying. I know it's a little harder said than done, but I think this space has really helped me open up to for my writing and helped me improve my writing because of me opening myself up. So yeah, I guess that's my advice.
Absolutely. No, those are all really, really great points, and I appreciate you sharing, and I wholeheartedly agree with everything. Yeah, I mean, between, just kind of putting yourself out there, like you said, not getting discouraged if you're not getting the, kind of attention that you want right off the
Yeah,
bat. It's one of those things where consistency and authenticity will get you
yeah.
will get you very far. It just
Yeah,
takes
and you
time.
got to read other people's work too. I would say it's
Yep.
important in putting yourself out there and you indulge a little here and there.
Yes, yes. Also
Because
a
there's
very good
great work
point.
out there. I'm sorry, but there's really amazing work on this site. So
Yeah. No, I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, I've said several times in the last couple of weeks that I think, I haven't touched any of the books that I have, like, actual physical books that I have, just because I've been reading exclusively on Substack, 'cause everything's amazing.
yeah, everything has been really, really, really damn good on there. And
Yeah,
there's stories on there that will stay with you for the rest of your life. Like genuine.
100%. Yeah, I completely wholeheartedly agree. Very well said.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Yeah.
Well, my friend, thank you so much for coming on to the show. This was an absolutely phenomenal interview, and it was so great to learn more about the person behind all of your incredible horror stories. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you again for coming on the show. This was really great.
Thank you. Seriously, I mean, this was awesome, and I'm really, really honored to be on here. And it's more than a damn blessing to be, interviewed on here. And just keep doing what you're doing, man. You're doing dope ass shit out there, and I think it's really coming to fruition. Like I've said before, I think your work will go places, Bradley. I think your work is gonna go very far, man. So just keep going, keep hitting it.
Fantastic advice, and I really appreciate the kind words. Thank you so much. All right, and a big thank you to Edward Marlowe Ruiz, or EMR, for coming on to the show. It was an amazing interview. And now a quick look at what's coming up next week. This week, we'll still continue the Madness and Mayhem Challenge all the way to the end of the month, and I'll be keeping an eye out for stories submitted to the Devine Deja Vu prompt. Remember, if you participate in that one, you get a guaranteed shout out next week. And speaking of Devine, I'm hoping to publish the next prelude this coming week, which will introduce us to the dread pirate, Jameson Netherwave, who is in fact based on my good friend and the first interview guest here on the Saved as Draft podcast, James Nethery. I'm excited to showcase this character's wild and wacky personality. He's both terrifying and hilarious in equal measure, and a fitting addition to the Order of the Pawn. This coming week will also see the final chapter released for the Echoes from the Abyss series that I've been writing. For those unaware, this series has featured polls at the end of every chapter, meaning that readers are allowed to decide what happens next. In Chapter 4, readers elected to head straight into the labyrinth without waiting for backup. A bold decision, but it will come with a high price. You'll just have to stay tuned for Chapter 5 to find out what it is. And that's all I've got for this week. Thank you once again to EMR for joining the show, and if you're curious about who will be joining us next week, I've got a little hint for you. They also happen to be one of the Turtles who runs the Turtles of Alchemy publication you may have heard of. And if you think about it, we already interviewed Rachel Tribble and EMR, so I'll let you figure it out from there. Thank you as well to everyone who's been participating in the Madness Mayhem Challenge once again. I love seeing all the new writers who've joined recently and dove right into the current or prior prompts. I love to see so many amazing stories and poems coming from this challenge. It really just... It's indescribable how much I take joy in seeing the work that everyone is doing here. So thank you. From the bottom of my heart, really, thank you. All right, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend, and I hope you have Monday off, but even if you don't, I hope your weekend's still fantastic. I'll see you on next week's episode, and this is Bradley Ramsey, signing off. Okay, so Barry, tell me one more time. How is the world going to come to an end?
Yeah, it's gonna be zombies. Definitely zombies.
Right, but you just said like 10 minutes ago that it was going to be nuclear warfare. So is it nuclear warfare and then zombies, or what's the connection here?
Oh, that's actually a good point. Well, now that you mention it, it's actually gonna be aliens. And they're going to have the nukes on their ship, and I'm not really sure where the zombies came from. Oh, but then we got to talk about the magnetic pole shifts.
Barry,